Welcome to Kojo's Math. In the first section, we talked about 9.1. We talked about changing a percent to a fraction and a fraction to a percent. In 9.2, we went over the percent equation. A over B equals P over 100, or is over of equals P over 100. And it's a proportion, and you show all the work like you do for a proportion. So most of you did quite well with that. If you're still not sure about what work to show when you have a proportion, please go back and rewatch the video on the percent equation, because you'll lose a lot of points on the test that we're going to have next week, not this coming week, but the following week. All right, so now we're going to be in 9.3 with percents and decimals. So what we're going to be doing is changing a percent to a decimal and a decimal to a percent. It's not as difficult as you might think, but just as a quick review, to change a fraction to a decimal, we read it 3 over 4, and this sign we treat like a division sign. So in your calculator, you would start at the top and go 3 divided by 4, which is 0.75. All right, so here we go. You're going to change a percent to a decimal, and we're going to start off with 74%. Well, I'm going to see if you can figure out what you need to do. If you have to change 74% to a decimal, that becomes 0.74. Think about it. Now, you have to change the decimal to a percent. So look at this. We have 0.27, and it becomes 27%. Think about that for a second. Okay, now let's talk about it. When we change a percent to a decimal, we divide by 100. And the easiest way to remember that is we want to get rid of the percent sign, and the percent is based on 100, so we divide by 100. We got to get rid of the percent, so we divide by 100 because all percent is based on 100. So we're going to put percent changed to a decimal, you divide by 100. So we're undoing the percent. So 1% divided by 100, if you put that in your calculator as 1 divided by 100, it's going to come out as 0.01. It's not a percent anymore. You're changing it to a decimal. Here we have 87.5%. Okay, now we have to get rid of the percent, change it to a decimal, and we're going to divide by 100 because percent is based on 100. So we go divided by 100, you go 87.5 divided by 100, and you're going to get 0.875. Notice this. You have to put all 3 digits. You can't round it because it was given to you as 87.5% basically, 87.5. Notice what's happening. Here's 1. The decimal point is here. 87.5. The decimal point is here. When I divide by 100, the decimal place goes 2 places to the left because there's 2 zeros. See, if I do this, I would go 1, 2, decimal point 0. 1, 2, decimal point 0. If that's confusing to you, that's a shortcut, you may do that. Then do your calculator 87.5 divided by 100. Now when we change a decimal to a percent, we're putting it into a percent, and all percent is based on what number? That's right, 100. So instead of dividing by 100 to take away the percent, we're going to, yes, multiply by 100 to change the decimal to a percent. So change to a percent, so the x will multiply by 100. So here we go. Here's a decimal. There's nothing here but decimals. There's no percent sign. So 0.08 times 100 becomes 8%. Now when you're changing it to a percent and you're multiplying by 100, you have to put the percent sign or it's incorrect. So here's tricky. We have 0.049 times 100. Put that into the calculator as 0.049 times 100, and you're going to get 4.9%. You have to include the 0.9%, just like you had to include the 5 up here when you had the decimal. So notice this one. Here, when we were dividing by 100, we moved the decimal place 2 places to the left because there's 2 zeros in 100. Well, if we multiply by 100, we're going to move the decimal places 2 places to the, yes, the right. That's the shortcut. You don't have to use the shortcut, but look, this was 8%. If I multiply by 100, I move it over 2, the decimal goes here, we drop the zeros in front of it, it becomes 8%. If I move it, multiply by 100 here, the decimal goes here, the 0 drops, and you get 4.9%. You just have to remember to put the percent there. Okay, now this homework you're going to have, these are problems you're going to have in homework today. And you do have the homework today in the book, but just a few problems so that you can practice. And then we'll take another day tomorrow. So problems in the homework, how to show work for less than, greater than, or equal. And you have a problem, let's make this 16. 0.16% is less than, greater than, or equal 0.016. Well, this is a decimal, and this is not. This is a percent. Don't look at that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I'll probably do it out of order, but you're going to understand the full gist of it in a minute. But must change these two numbers, this number and this number, into the same form. Either they're both percents or they're both decimals. If you're going to change them both to percents, one's already a percent. So you would multiply this one by what? 100 to change that to a percent. So I'm going to change it to a percent. So this moves 2 places, and I have to show that I'm multiplying by 100. And then I would put, it's going to move to 1.6% underneath this. That's showing your work. If you don't, you're not going to get any credit. So then you compare 0.16%, that's a number less than 1, is less than or greater than 1.6%. That's right, it's less than. That's all you would do. If you change this to a decimal, you would not multiply by 100, but you would divide by 100. So you put 0.16 divided by 100 in your calculator. It's going to move 2 places to the left, and it's going to become 0.0016, and you would compare it to 0.016, and it would still be less than. Don't do both of them. Pick one. Either put them all into percents or put them all into decimals. I don't care. But you have to show work to get full credit. These are the types of problems you're going to have for today's homework assignment or daily work assignment. There's like 8 problems or so. Not a lot. The first part of the homework, the daily work, will be problems where you just simply change the percent to a decimal by dividing and by 100, or changing a decimal to a percent by multiplying by 100. You just write the answer. But now, tomorrow, on Tuesday, you will have large and small percents. It's in the same section, but I decided to take 2 days. Percent, no matter what, is always based on 100%. But we can have large percents. For instance, if I buy a house for $100,000, that represents 100%. If I sell the house for $150,000, I got my money back. That's 100%. And then I sold it for 50% more. See how that works? So I would sell the house for 150%. If I sold the house for $200,000, 100% is $100,000. So I have to get my money back, pay myself back. And then it doubled, so another 100%. So it would be a large percent of 200%. So all you're going to do right now, we're going to do word problems later, is you're going to change large percents to decimals and small percents to decimals. So we have large change to a decimal. You have 375%. You want to change it to a decimal. To change percents to decimal, you divide by what number always, because percent is always based on what number? 100. So you would divide by 100, or move the decimal place 2 places to the left. So if you divide by 100 on your calculator, you're going to get 3.75. It is a number that is not a percent any longer, so no percent sign. And then you're going to divide 250% divided by 100 becomes 2.5. You don't put 2.50 because you don't need the O. If you put that, it's useless. It doesn't mean anything. You drop it. It doesn't, you don't write it unless it was 2.505. Then you have to write it. But if it's just at the end, you drop it. Now you have to change small percents, change totals to decimals. You still divide by 100. And here's the tricky thing. This says 0.25%. You may say, it's a decimal already. No, it's not. It's a small percent that's less than 1, the number 1. That is like a fourth of 1. It's 0.25%. It is not a decimal. It is considered a percent. So you do it the same way. These are percents, not decimals. You still think of them as percents, even though there's a decimal. So you divide, still divide by 100, and that would become 2 places to the left, 0.0025. It's no longer a percent. See how small that number is? And then this one, 0.00014. It's a percent. We want to change it to a decimal. We divide by 100. We put it into the calculator as 0.00014. And we get 0.000014 because we're moving it 2 places to the left. And then we have to add the decimal and put one out front. All right. These we're doing on Tuesday. I would advise you that when you go to do these problems on Tuesday, that you review this part of the video so you can remind yourself, especially about these decimals in the percent. Now, if you are finding a large or small percent of a number, change it to a regular decimal and multiply. So if we have 450% of 12, you're going to change this to a decimal by dividing by 100. When you do that, you're going to get 4.5 times 12. That's your work. You're going to show me that you're dividing by 100, and then you're going to rewrite 4.5 times 12. And then 4.5, let me get my calculator, 4.5 times 12 is equal to 54. So 450% of 12 is 54. So let's say that's my cost of making caramel apples. And I want to charge, oh boy, that's an expensive caramel apple. I'm going to charge 450% because I want to make some money. So that means each caramel apple would sell for $54. You think anybody would buy one? I don't know. It depends on how good and how big the caramel apples are and how much stuff's on them. Okay, so now we have 0.8%. Small percent, still a percent, not a decimal. We need to change that to a decimal by dividing by 100 here. We're going to get 0.008. This is no longer a percent, it's a decimal. And we're going to multiply by 100. Because it's of 100. It has nothing to do with percent and everything like that. So you put in your calculator, you say 0.008 times 100, and you get 0.8. Think about that. This is a number less than 1%. 1% of 100 is the number 1. So if I said 1% of $100 would be $1. And if I said I wanted 0.8% of $1, it's 80 cents. I didn't put the 0 on there. If I was talking about money, I'd have to add a 0. That is not 8 cents. That's 0.8. It would be 80 cents because you're adding. That's it. Remember, when you're doing this work on Tuesday, large and small percents, come back and maybe watch this part of the video so that you're good to go. Make sure you do the homework that goes along with this video, and have a great day, and I'll see you in class.